If you think back to the last sort of interesting, most inaccurate plan that hasn't helped your leasing agreement. And that's what we suffer at Realserve as building surveyors and building measurers too, because I as a manager would always ask for plans or any other description for a site to help us in our QA processes and our checking of the site to make sure that we've done the job that we have quoted and been paid to do. So over 50% of the time, we don't get a plan. Now you'll know I'm not a lawyer, so I actually like visual demonstrations. All of this presentation, it's just photos. There's barely a word in it. These are very useful for me as a manager because what I give back to the client, they cannot dispute it. Also, they're really, really bad because I can't check what my draftsmen, my surveyors have done either. So they're both good and bad. We get the emails. That response there at the bottom, I kid you not, that is a word-for-word response from a client. In fact, it was 39 square metres bigger and it was 3 different parts to the building. We still get strata plans. You'll see how old that strata plan is because it has square feet on it. Get the architect's plans. Now, I can understand why people give us architect's plans. They've paid for a design, they feel what is designed ought to be what is built. If you've dealt with builders, it's yes, she's about right. So, unfortunately, the architect's plans are also not as-built plans. And sometimes we'll get the client who's got one of his colleagues to measure the building, and then we'll get those plans. So I guess you have to ask yourself, why are you then going to move on to get a different method? Why use a surveyor? Well, we as surveyors and building measurers typically operate to this guideline here. It's the guideline for measurements of rentable areas, and it's put out by the Property Council of New Zealand. Now, it was originally the BOMA document back in the very early 1980s. It's been revised about 4 or 5 different times. I think the last revision was 2013. Prior to that was 1996. So if you've got any surveyed plan that is older than 2013, I would suggest have it remeasured. And this document has been influenced by lawyers, yourselves. It's been influenced by valuers. It's been influenced by building measurers. It's been influenced by tenants, by landlords, by property management. That is to say, that black book there has had as much influence from a vast spectrum of people that work in the property industry on a daily basis. So the booklet itself says that you probably should use this booklet and provide plans based on this booklet as often as possible. So that's the guide that we use. And it tells us to measure 4 different ways. You have method 1, which is office whole floor. Method 2 is when you have 2 or 3 or 4 different tenants on that same floor. So that's office part floor. You have method 3, which is retail, and then method 4 is industrial. And all of those methods have their own descriptions. You'll see them in your books anyway. There's a plan that goes side by side so you can sort of compare and contrast what is relevant to which method. What I'd like to do for the purpose of this presentation though is go back to some of these plans and show you in contrast to those methods within that black book how these plans do not help compared to what the method tells us. And I'd like to use the checklist that is also within that Realserve section. That checklist, sort of from my managerial point of view, operates in a scale of priorities, if I could put it that way. So when I'm looking at this plan was actually for an office site in Newton. It's a very recent build. In fact, the architect who designed that plan is actually on the top floor. That's probably why we didn't get the actual job, because he thought his plan was right. There's on-site car parking in the basement, there's a ground floor cafe, and it's got very long-term stable tenants. A childcare centre isn't going to move quickly, nor is a cafe. The area that's circled, that's the tenancy that we were asked to go and have a look at. So if I see that plan straight away, I know it's an architecturally designed plan. It's not as measured. There's no survey date, primarily because it wasn't measured, but it does have drawing dates and drawing revisions. Those don't particularly help when you need a surveying date. Well, how about lease line definition? Sorry, we'll go back one step. A method of measure. There's no method of measure on there. We don't know how the architect has defined his areas. In fact, that little disclaimer down the bottom, there's what he actually wrote. We've designed it, we think we've got some areas, but you'll need a building surveyor to go and confirm it. But that's the plan that a property manager gave me and that they had been using. So not even they read the disclaimer. There's no lease line definitions at all on that plan, even if we look closely at this tenancy here. So what areas are apportioned in this plan? Well, when I look at this plan, I have concerns with the areas that ought to be excluded. Lifts, common lobbies that come off the car parks, the fire egress stairwell around that whole column there. When I look at this plan, I see that as being method 1 because that is the sole tenant on that floor. And yet the stair void there has been included. When I look at the sub-basement, that's the only stair going up and down between the 2 floors. So he's included part of it, yet based off the methods, we'll show you in a minute, part of that ought to be excluded. So what I'm just pointing out here, based off a very casual look at this plan, I know straight away a lot of that is inaccurate. So what should we actually see? Well, you as lawyers, particularly when you need a leasing documents to go into your agreements, it has to be clear and simple for you. Straight off the bat, the clarity from here. You know where your lease line is, you know what your separations of areas are, you know straight away there's the method of measurement. What method it's been measured to, in fact what date it's been measured to, what revision, etc. There's the survey date on it. So you know it's been measured on a particular day. Any other day past that date, if there's changes to that tenancy, you can go back to your plan and say, okay, I know prior to that date, that's why my plan is different. In fact, you know what method it was measured to. So if this tenancy suddenly changed to retail, you know you've got a problem on your hands. So now I look at that plan as well, and I can see down the bottom left-hand corner, I've got a key there of abbreviations that tell me all my lease line definitions. Those same abbreviations are around that red lease line. So when I look to see around that excluded zone of lift, foyer, and fire egress stairs, that's now gone to rentable face of wall. So I can understand where my lease line has now gone. I can now see that my stair void is excluded. That too has gone to the top tread of my top stair. It's gone to the rentable face of the walls all around that stair. Even in the sub-basement, it's now gone to rentable face, it's gone to the bottom tread, and there's a little code there called head height. When we're asked in that black book to measure areas, we go to 1.5 from the floor. Anything that comes under 1.5, such as in these examples, is then excluded based off the guidelines. So that height to 1.5, and if you've got, say, an A-frame roof that comes to a mezzanine, or the spaces under the stairs, as per this tenancy, those areas are to be excluded per that guideline. The final thing on this tenancy particularly, even the architect said it in his disclaimer, is that we found them another 35 square metres. So if the property manager had continued with the architectural plan, their tenancy would be short 35 square metres. To date, I still love this one because it came through about 18 months ago, and I do feel it's still my favourite. It's for Macpac down on Queen Street. So this is the plan that we received for a downtown ground floor retail tenancy that has 10 metre street frontage. And it's even got a scan date on there, which you may not be able to see over on the right-hand side, of 1998. So it's at least 20 years old. We can go through the same questions again. Is it as measured? Well, I have to say, if it's as per the current council GIS plans, then I would definitely say no. There's no survey date, there's no as measured, there's no method of measurement, there's no lease line definitions, and my concerns lie around the common lobbies, the lift lobby, down the bottom there, the plant rooms, the fire egress, particularly in the back here. Just a little note, 2 areas in this part. Now, from my point of view, if I measure this to method 3, what are those areas? Are they levels like floors, or are they mezzanine floors? Because it's a big difference when we do our measures. We should be seeing things like this. Obviously, we know from these plans, we've got the method of measurement, we've got the process of knowing it is as measured, we've also got the date. So when we look at those discrepancies of excluded areas, we can see again at the lift lobby and the common lobby, it's to rentable face of wall, etc. We now know we've got a plant room up there, we've got the fire egress, all of those again to rentable face of wall. The concerning thing, where the 2 levels were, they're actually 2 mezzanine floors. Mezzanine floors, you take them to external face when they go over a void. And with retail particularly, you'll see here on the ground floor plan, the stairs that lead up to them are included in the area. The void around those stairs going down is excluded. That's one of the largest differences between office and retail when the method changes. Sometimes you get an office tenancy which will soon become a retail, and there's that large discrepancy there. Also, you'll see that the Ingo at the Queen Street end there is separated out to show the area. That's primarily because although an entry into a retail will be there, retail guidelines tell us to take a straight shopfront lease line as per negotiations in the lease. But we do show on plans what the area of Ingo would be. The other thing that you'll see on that plan is a vast number of columns that are included on it. That is quite simply because any column, any shape, any size, any location is to be included in the plans, included in the area, beg your pardon. The guides have over 2 pages of descriptions on how to deal with columns. So unfortunately, they are included. It might affect your tenant if they are the tenants, but it's good for the landlord. The other thing with this plan, particularly in that blue area there, if you remember the strata plan, is that that whole area has now changed, it's increased. So this plan in general had another 95 square metres. So if you're now thinking, particularly as valuers, downtown Queen Street retail tenancy with a 10 metre shop front, I've got close to 100 square metres more. That's scary. The client that gave us this plan for an industrial site told us straight away there are around 2 metre discrepancies in it. So that was useful. I do know it was measured, but now I know that it's measured poorly. I don't know when it was measured, I don't know how it was measured. I do know there are no areas in that plan because it's showing different regions within the building, but it's not showing me exactly what that plan's trying to describe. In fact, it ignores completely the 3 different categories of measurement for industrial sites. So what you're looking for, particularly with industrial, is a separation. The first being enclosed areas. Those areas which are found inside the warehouse and office space itself. Now, industrial is the only method which then moves to taking the measurements to the external face of the building. The other 2 methods that you're looking for are semi-enclosed and development or unenclosed land. So semi-enclosed areas are things like open canopies, covered walkways, if you've got a patio over your lunch area, the covers over the entrances, for instance. Unenclosed areas are things like car parks, yard spaces, areas that could be used for development. So all those areas ought to be shown and described on your plan. The guidelines too are then moving more and more to try and show the cubic volume of industrial sites. It's very important for a tenant, particularly, to know what his cubic area, the cubic volume of his site is going to be. So particularly on our plans, the more that we do for industrial, we like to demonstrate what that is. As time's now running short, I'd just like to reiterate, because this, from my point of view of finding the area, is probably the most important thing that you as lawyers can do to help remind your clients. Make sure that you know your plans as measured. Make sure that you know there is a survey date to it. On that page now, Realserve thing, there's a few considerations that go with each of these, so it's probably important to check why we're trying to encourage that you have a look at these as a checklist. I would say, I'll skip over the future aspect because I'll just leave it here as a conclusion. I feel that a very good check, even for yourselves, is to go and have a look at your own leasing plans. See if you can find them. That's probably a starter. And then see if any of these match up to your leasing plans. And if they don't, well, the first step. I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Reece. Reed, I must admit, when you put up that problematic lease, I was straining to see whether it's one of ours, but I'm relieved it wasn't.